And welcome to Haunted Hotels. My name is Sam Baltrusis, and I'm an author. Joining me is my good friend and demonologist, James Annitto. Hey, James, welcome to the show.
Hello, Sam. Thank you for having me on tonight.
Haunted Hotels, brother. You and I have been to a few ourselves, including later in the show, we're actually going to report live from the Providence Biltmore. And that whole location has a whole backstory. We actually met at that location in person for the first time, right?
Yes, very first time that we ever met was the Biltmore, now the Graduate Hotel, and what a memorable experience that was, for sure.
So since then, we've actually done a lot of events together. We traveled at various ParaCons together. And this past weekend, we actually were at the Fan Expo Boston, and we did like a last-minute panel. I have to say it was very good. So tell us people a little bit about the panel and what we talked about.
So it was, of course, hosted by yourself and then also sponsored by Boston Sci-Fi Film Festival. And we talked about paranormal monsters and how it related to pop culture. Of course, we talked about The Exorcist, The Conjuring. And then we also talked about, of course, Oliver Estate, because we had Christy J. Parrish there, and how we were able to interpret many things that are interpreted as monsters in the paranormal and give our kind of field experience and what we've dealt with. It was pretty fascinating. We all did a good job.
So one of the movies we talked about, and we kind of actually go into...
That's my dog, Toby, if you heard that, guys. It's not a EVP or anything like that. There's nobody screaming in the background.
Okay, so it's not a demon dog. That's good to know.
No.
One of the locations we talked about, or one of the movies we talked about that was inspired by a real haunting, is the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, and we showed a clip of The Shining. And so, what are your thoughts on haunted hotels in general? I mean, do you think that and one of the backstory to that is, like Stephen King stayed there, had a pretty terrifying dream that turned into the book, that turned into the movie. I mean, do you think hotels are haunted by naturally because of the amounts of people that come into the hotels?
Yeah, I think it's many different things. Of course, it could be the amount of volume of people that come and go through a hotel, leave their emotions good, bad, or neutral. And there's deaths that occur in hotels in dubious ways. Like ways that we cannot explain sometimes, such as like what happened at the Biltmore, right? With what occurred there. So I think there's so many things that can occur in a hotel that allow a certain amount of activities that occur. And I think the people that stay at a hotel in a modern sense, I think we kind of advance the haunting. We allow it to occur because maybe we're attuned to it, or we're more gullible to it as well. So, or we're seeking it, and it speaks back, or it tries to tell its story.
So, James, speaking of hotels, we're actually staying at a hotel that I used to work at in Quincy, Mass, coming up at the Mass ParaCon, coming up on September 7th through the 19th. Go to massparacon.com, and you're hosting a demonology dinner coming up at the event. So tell us a little bit about that event, and we'll talk a little bit about the hotel for our viewers.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks to you, and of course you hosting Mass ParaCon in Quincy. Of course, the Demonology Panel is basically a gathering of fellow like-minded individuals that study demonology, what we call ourselves demonologists. And it is the largest combination of different perspectives in the demonology field for the first time. It's basically history, even though it's not being touted, and it's not like in the Guinness World Records book or something like that, but it is a big piece of history in the demonology field and the paranormal, because you have Nathaniel Gillis, Sean Austin, Michael Salerno, Carl Johnson, Keith Johnson, Sandra Johnson, Marco Villa, and myself. And then it's moderated by historian and curator Elise Gianmarco Carlson. So it's going to be for the exclusive amount of people that are a part of that, and to get to have dinner while listening to our stories. And also, when, of course, they're done eating, asking questions from, we have over 200 plus years of experience in that one room, just between the panelists. That's crazy.
So you and I have actually been to the hotel before, and I know that you're not sensitive, James, but did you pick up on any energy when you were at the hotel with me at the Best Western Adams?
Yeah, I didn't pick up on necessarily feeling like where like I was scared or didn't want to be there. But I think in a lot of places, of course, where that is located as well, there could be residual, and maybe I felt something, but for sure I did get smacked by the Biltmore Hotel when I was there. I don't call myself sensitive, but definitely that hotel pulled me, and of course other hotels I've stayed at that have had that draw. And once you walked in, you felt like you were going back in time, and you were in a time loop.
So the Adams Inn, which is where the mass Paracon's is taking place, believe it or not, there actually is a murder backstory. So Whitey Bulger lived nearby, like literally almost across the street, and he would actually dump the bodies of some of his victims right outside of where the hotel is. So when I first started working at the Best Western Adams Inn for the overnight shift, I noticed what looked like a woman while walking into the lobby. She went through the doors. I saw her walk by, and I'm like, who the heck is that? And it turns out there is a lady in white that's been spotted, and we believe it's one of the victims from Whitey Bulger.
That's very fascinating. It should be. You should definitely. We should do like a gathering outside of it one night and try to attempt communication, when at least time traffic. But what's also interesting too, talking about the lady in white, right? We also had that experience when we first met, basically at the Biltmore Hotel, when we also worked with a fellow investigator, Russ, and we all had that experience, and it was crazy. We were all following that, and then eventually we came to this picture where you said, that looks like her. And both of you pointed that out, and that was very fascinating. So it's kind of like a similar situation. It seems like all hotels, maybe with certain dynamics, have the same kind of replication.
Now, speaking of the lady in white, and I know you're a demonologist and you tend to focus on different types of cases, but you also talk about themes that recur throughout the paranormal. And the lady in white is kind of a common theme. And one idea, someone actually brought this up to me recently, is that a lot of women were actually buried in their wedding gowns, especially in the 1800s and 1900s. What are your thoughts on the lady in white? Is it sort of like what she's wearing, or is it sort of like how we are able to recognize the woman, or could it be her wedding gown?
So that's actually a very interesting perspective on that, and part of that before. You think about it, like when people tend to see spirit, it is at their happiest of moments of time, or the youngest point in time. Usually, it's the happiest moment, because that's what they kind of linger on. That kind of what kind of keeps the echo going. But I also think it could be also too, in the same form of shadow people. It could be like a way of projection, like a accumulation of energy. It's allowed to kind of manifest. And sometimes it's just light, because it's the best way it could, have an apparitional form. So I think there's different things. I think it could be like the wedding dress, or it could be just how it is manifesting. But no theory is technically wrong, so it's very interesting. But these phenomena has been encountered many times by different people.
So speaking of phenomenon, so that hotel also, having worked the overnight shift, I was looking at security camera, and there looked like there was like a shadow figure, the security camera, and I was, so I saw what looked like a shadow figure that appeared in the security camera, and I was with someone who was at the front desk, and I'm like, what does that look like to you? And she's like, that looks like a shadow person. So in addition to the lady in white, there's a shadow person. And why would a shadow person be lurking in the shadows of a hotel?
Well, it's also different. Some say it's an interdimensional being. Once it could also be the way it manifests. I think how hauntings occur are definitely dependent on the people putting into the haunting. The feeding of it, and I think sometimes there is a knowledge of a place being haunted, and that knowledge is there for people. So that perception, the people that are staying there, some people are there for that. So I think these spirits can feed off of that, and that's how they might be appearing. Or in fact, there might be a shadow person there because there has been many lost souls there, and it is lingering there because of this. There's so many different factors that could be applied to a haunted hotel specifically.
Well, this hotel actually is not known as the haunted hotel, and I found so intriguing. It was like coming in, and I'm like, I was kind of called to it, and not knowing the backstory of the lady in white. And it's almost like the people that work there, they knew about people having the experience in white, but they don't of course promote it as a haunted hotel because it supposedly scares guests away. But I also found that, so by working overnight shift, I also saw what appeared to be doppelgangers. And so I was working one night, and around 5 in the morning, I saw a woman kind of run out into the lobby, and I could see her reflection in the mirrors or the glass that was facing out to the water. And I thought someone was running up to hopefully, like they forgot something, or they had to check out and catch a flight. And so I went around the corner to see if this woman needed help, and there was nobody there. So I go to the elevator to see if she may have ran back to the elevator, and down comes a woman from the 3rd floor wearing a blue shirt. And I'm like, ma'am, were you just in the lobby? And she's like, no, but I'm about to miss my flight, and I had a horrible dream that I was running in the lobby trying to catch a shuttle to go to the airport. So, I mean, have you heard, and she was actually alive, she wasn't a ghost, but seeing someone have a dream and their body kind of leave themselves and appear to other people like myself who are sensitive?
Yeah, definitely. If she didn't have that dream, I would have said it was a premonition because of your abilities. But in that fact, maybe she, of course, has abilities too, and she astral projected because of the stress. She kind of emoted with her stress, this projection of her, and you were able to see that kind of imprint, which was that's pretty fascinating. Of course, this has been documented or interpreted in many different cases. Of course, talking about our expo earlier, The Conjuring, similar thing with Carolyn Perrin, she kind of time looped, and that could have actually occurred in that house. So it's interesting how imprints could work and how people with abilities might kind of feed off each other in a way.
All right, so we also are, you're doing a big convention coming up for the Halloween. Speaking of The Conjuring, the Warren, tell us a little bit about that and what can we expect for that 2-day event?
Yeah, so October 30th and 31st, the Warrens, Seekers of the Supernatural ParaCon, hosted by Nesper, Dan Rivera, Tony Sparrow, Judy Sparrow, and that great team, of course. They are having a bunch of speakers and a bunch of vendors out in Connecticut celebrating the Warrens and getting people together to prosper and work together and understand what the Warrens were about. And, people have their misconceptions, but to get people together. And, there's Ryan Buell, there's Carl Johnson, Keith and Sandra, there's myself. There is a cryptozoologist there, a ufologist there, I do believe. There's so many different factored people there and different perspectives. And of course, I know you're going to be there and so many other great vendors. And they're getting together. And also, too, for the people, because the museum is closed to the public, they're going to be presenting artifacts. And, one of the biggest cultural phenomenons, Annabelle will be there as well. Of course, the movie's made after the doll, and the spirit, of course. You will be able to see Annabelle if you've never been in her presence before as well. And so that's going to be a 2-day event with the VIP Friday, which is sold out. It's going to be a fun time. It's going to be crazy.
All right, so for people that don't know Annabelle, I mean, how can you not know Annabelle? But Annabelle is a famous case with Ed and Lorraine Warren, and it actually is a Raggedy Ann doll. But of course, in the movies, they portray Annabelle as sort of like this really creepy, like Victorian era looking doll. So tell for people that don't know the whole backstory to Annabelle, who is she and why is she so terrifying to a lot of people?
So the story in essence is not truly terrifying of how the haunting occurred. Yes, some really interesting things and activity occurred with the nurse that had the doll. The doll would be animatronic. It would move. It would move from place to place. But where the stories really get daunting is, of course, Ed and Lorraine having the doll in the museum and encapsulating it in a box and binding it, of course, and people downplaying the doll, talking bad about it. So if one being a priest and the priest was thrown, and Ed Warren came in and You seen the priest on the floor. He's like, "What happened?" As I told you not to mess with the doll. So there's the stories when the Warrens had it basically are the more interesting. The motorcycle driver that spoke ill will of the doll, then got a motorcycle accident, and then I believe perished afterwards after basically talking down to Annabelle. So a lot of the stories, more so than later, are more scary. But yeah, Annabelle is a Raggedy Ann doll, as you said, and it's not as scary as the one seen in the movies. But I really do think, though, Sam, not to linger on this too long, but if they had a Raggedy Ann doll attacking people in the movies, I'd be more scared of that.
I agree with you. And you've actually blessed the occult museum. And did you pick up on any, like, was it weird or scary to be in that museum with all those haunted artifacts?
So I never felt anything bad off Annabelle, but I also don't go in there kind of like determine if things are haunted or not. Like I try to go in there with a neutral mindset and try to stay grounded, of course. I think it is cool. Like these are icons in the paranormal field that everybody's read about. If you're an avid paranormal investigator, you've learned about these stories and heard about them. So being in their presence, it is kind of awe-inspiring. But I never felt wavering. I've been in demonic cases, people being possessed, and the feeling of that was intense. The feeling in the museum was more awe-inspiring, like sitting in the chair Ed Warren sat in, talking to Tony and the guys about their career and blessing it. Which was a great honor. That was more the feeling for me, and I go in this with a different mindset than most people, so maybe it kind of comes off differently for me.
All right, so James, you are going to be dressing up for Halloween. What are you going to be for Halloween this year?
Oh, I don't know. We're going to be dressed up at that event on the 30th, and then we're going to, of course, go out with Caleb. But it's really whatever he picks. It could be a Ghostbuster uniform. It could whatever. It could be a Transformer. It's what my son Caleb picks. I hope it's not something crazy though.
Now, Caleb is like my nephew, and so what like since he's doing karate, have you thought about maybe a karate theme this year or?
Yeah, I could be Mr. Miyagi and him Daniel-san wax on, wax off.
I love it, James. So if people want to reach out to you, what is your website?
So you can reach out to me through jamesannitto.com, JAMESANNITTO.com. Or the easier way, if you can't spell my name, is DEMONOLOGY.org, demonology.org.
And guys, we still have a few tickets left for the Demonology dinner at the Best Western Adams on September 18th. James, brother, I hope you have an awesome Halloween, and looking forward to seeing you again at the Mass ParaCon. James, so we actually did an interview a few months back at the very haunted Providence Biltmore. What do you remember about that discussion?
Well, I remember quite a bit. It was kind of the first time we've been back together since the first time we met there, and it graduated for sure.
Sounds good to me. So we're going to check out the Providence Biltmore in Providence, Rhode Island, and it's now called The Graduate. And we'll see you next week on Haunted Hotels with Sam Baltrusis. And welcome to another edition of Haunted Hotels with Sam Baltrusis. Joining me at the very haunted Providence Biltmore is the one and only James Annitto.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody.
So, James, when we first met, we actually met at the Providence Biltmore. So, yes. Tell us, go back 4 or 5 years ago when we first met at this location.
Well, we were always friends on social media. We had communicated. We had, of course, had some sort of bond. But when we got here, it was like it was meant to be.
Right.
And I felt like the Biltmore kind of dragged us to meet and experience that night, the activity, the emotions, and the activity of the hotel. And I think we did experience things. We had another person that had abilities, and you, of course, are magnificent in your abilities. And you guys were sensing things, but I could feel it too. I felt like we were part of the party. We were part of the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. We were part of history. And once you walk in this building, it's like stepping back in history.
It really is. So it was called the Providence Biltmore. It was built in 1922. It was built by supposedly a Satanist. His name is Johann Weisdorf. That was his name. Yes. And that's the legend. And also there's the legend that there was a chicken coop, which is a fact, on the top floor, and they actually committed animal sacrifices. Yep. And then they did a blood purification in the basement. Now, we do know this was a hot spot for mobsters, and there was a lot of illicit activity, like parties, gambling, prostitution, on the lower floors. Now, when we first came to this location, it was very different in aesthetic. It looked like it was from the 20s.
Yes, it did.
And now it's, what is it called now?
Now it's the Graduate, but it does feel like it graduated a little bit. In reality, like it is more aesthetically modern, and of course, that emotion, I feel like that's still there. Maybe even heightened because of the renovations that have occurred. Maybe they feel out of place now. They feel like, what is going on? This does not feel like the 1920s, 30s, 40s. It feels, what is this? Alien to them.
Well, that's a good question. So, do you think that because the spirits are from the 20s and 30s, that because they did the renovations, maybe that stirred them up?
It definitely could have. I think you see that a lot. I think sometimes spirits can be activated in a form of a negative repercussion where they don't like what's being done. Like they feel like people are invading, changing things. Or sometimes it could be reciprocated in the fact that they actually like it, and maybe the energy actually gets more calming. I feel like the same emotion, same kind of feeling that I had last time.
Yeah.
Still lingers.
Right.
But also we investigated last time. We've only kind of talked and had a personal conversation. Now we're doing, of course, the show. But we haven't seek communication. At least I haven't. So I haven't been able to see and understand if things have changed or not.
Well, I'll tell you. So, I'm clairvoyant. Yes. So I walked in. When I first walked in, I opened up the window, and I immediately felt like someone opening up the window and jumping out of the window.
Ooh.
In this room.
It does that has happened though, right? Is this the room?
Possibly.
Yes, that is one of the sightings.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You'll see it. What looks like a man from the early. It was during the Great Depression, and the Black Friday when all the stocks went down. Oh yeah. A lot of people committed suicide, and so they see actually a man wearing 1930s, 1920s garb falling out of the window, and it's like on an endless loop over and over again.
Residual haunting. Yes, right. For sure.
And then there's when I was reporting earlier on Facebook Live, someone reported that they saw a woman, and they said she was a dancer from the 20s. Now, when we were here before, we actually communicated with a woman.
Yes, we did.
And I would say she was probably a flapper, 20s, 30s. And it would make sense because there was a room called the Bacante room.
Yeah.
And that is where a lot of the women they would dress kind of risquely for the era. Yeah. Do you know anything about that whole story, the Bacante room?
I really do not, but the one thing that, for the listeners, of course, and the watchers, the viewers, one of the things that was interesting about that kind of brought back and kind of gave me bone-chilling thoughts was the fact that it brought up. Remember, we were drawn to a certain picture,
right?
And we were you guys clearly picked out the woman and said that was the woman that you were seeing.
Right there. So there was basically photos, kind of similar to The Shining. So at the end of The Shining, you see Jack Torrance, who is at the Overlook Hotel in the 1920s, and that's sort of the finale of the film. Yep. Well, we had our moment that was similar, and there was a woman that we're communicating with that was a spirit, and she pointed to the picture, and it was from the 1930s.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
And it was crazy, and the woman was wearing white. Yeah, and she was in the photo. She led us to this photo.
Yeah, and you guys, and before you even seen the photo, you gave physical characteristics of this woman.
Yeah,
it was a spitting image to what you guys had characterized.
And that just kind of shows you that when you walk into this hotel, it is like a time warp. And I feel like right now, we're kind of I would say 50s. When I walk into this room, and it could be the decor. When you're downstairs, and even if you put paint in the walls, you can't paint over the ghosts.
Yes, that's true.
Or the history, and you can still smell it. You can smell the ghost. You can smell the energy, and you can also feel it too.
For sure.
So when it comes to the Satanist part of this backstory and the whole whole idea of like blood sacrifice, and we've talked about this before from my book,
Yes.
Haunted Hotels in New England. Why would something like a blood ritual leave an imprint on this hotel?
Well, in many cases, it depends on what you're invoking, because blood rite doesn't always mean something negative. But of course, when we think of Satanism or diabolism or enacting and calling Satan forth in a negative way, which could have been the reasons that were done here, because maybe for back in those days, of course, people like on Black Friday committed suicide because they lost fortunes, and they of course were depressed on that. So a lot of people sought out preternatural, supernatural causes of course gaining fortune and gaining money. So I could see maybe the Satanism and being the rituals doing that was maybe in some form of hoping for fortune, hoping for this Biltmore hotel to prosper and to grow, which it has. It's been here since the 20s. Now it's 2020. It's 100 years, right?
Well, it's 2021.
101 years. I'm sorry, COVID messed me up.
It's actually almost the 100th anniversary because it was built in 1922.
Oh, there you go.
So we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of the Providence Biltmore.
So maybe that is in some form why it was enacted, but you definitely see the iconography of like the symbolism of the Satanism, the Masonry, Freemasons as well. So it is a lot of mixture of what has gone into this building, and when they say you build buildings and people, and of course when they built buildings back in the 20s and 30s, a lot of people died, iron workers and people falling off the building. So a lot of blood, sweat, and tears were built into this building, and more blood was added to it at the end.
Yeah, and even if there wasn't a blood sacrifice or blood purification, there was probably blood from suicides, murders, that sort of thing. And speaking of murders, like there's been reports of murders, especially during when there was prostitution.
Okay,
and there was a girl supposedly murdered in the bathroom, and she was a young prostitute. What are your thoughts on murders, like leaving a psychic imprint on hotels specifically?
I think it's interesting because in a hotel, you think of a hotel as a place that you go to as like a vacationing or getting away from where your homestead is. So to be murdered in a place that you're going there for an activity or to escape your home in some forms, and then being murdered, I think would leave a heavier psychic imprint than maybe being murdered at another location, because you're trapped, you're lost. For people that understand lost souls, if you're murdered in a hotel, that means there's a lot of lost souls here, and they're probably more confused. They probably want to go home. They probably cannot go to heaven or what your belief is of the afterlife. So they are trapped in this hotel in a very confused state, and I think in that confused state that could also allow many different emotions,
right?
More than being somewhere else. I think the location and the cause and effect does have a kind of a connection, like a mathematical equation. I think there's certain things that add to a haunting, and a hotel is one of them.
And the legend is that this was inspiration for Stephen King for The Shining, like some parts of it.
Yeah.
For example, this is on Dorrance Street, and the lead character is Jack Torrance.
Yeah.
And they say like that similarity is kind of weird. If you walk down the halls and you're waiting, like the carpet even reminds you of the Stanley Hotel or of the Overlook Hotel, which is the fictional hotel. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some inspiration involved, but I think that having a hotel like this, like with the blood rituals and the Satanists, would also be inspiration for American Horror Story.
For sure.
And which
American Story Hotel, right?
Yeah, Hotel and the Hotel Cortez. And we know that for a fact that the Los Angeles, the Cecil Hotel was inspiration for it. But I think that parts of like what really happened here was something that inspired Brian Murphy to create the hotel, like some of the backstory.
No, certainly. You think about it, before there was Los Angeles, there was, of course, Providence, and Providence Biltmore was one of the most iconic hotels, and still, of course, until it became The Graduate, was a very iconic hotel.
Right.
So, of course, that's going to inspire many different things, and it has inspired many different hotels in design as well.
Now you're born and raised in Rhode Island, and
I was born in New York.
Oh, New York.
On Long Island. I'm actually from an island, but I live in a fake island now. So.
But you've lived in Rhode Island a long time.
Life, yes.
And so like having that backstory in Rhode Island, what was your like your thoughts on Rhode Island and the Biltmore growing up? Was this something that you always wanted to go inside? Did it intrigue you?
Oh, definitely. You think about it, the ice rinks across the street. I've been to that ice rink so many times, and I believe there was a Starbucks in the Biltmore Hotel. And so there was a few times I've been in the Starbucks to get hot chocolate or whichever after being cold in the ice. But, still though, it's something I've always, especially being enamored with the paranormal, so thrilled and know the history of Providence and longevity of it. I've always wanted to investigate this place. But when I met you and was able to take it in and be with you, your abilities are phenomenal, and just to have that feeling too. So yes, always being from Rhode Island and seeing the Biltmore Hotel, I've always wondered how expansive this place was,
right.
How the rooms were, it was just so beautiful. And
I mean, one of the things too, there's been a lot of reports of people supposedly checking in but not checking out.
Oh,
so
yes.
they go missing. What are your thoughts on that?
Unfortunately, I would think a lot of it, unless of course there's a factual backing to it. Some of it's folklore because every place has folklore, myth to it. But for the people that have gone missing, you got to remember we talked about mobsters,
right?
And unfortunately, if you get bad with the Italian mob or any other mob, you might disappear. But still, though, that leaves an imprint, right? If something negative occurs in a location, that does leave an imprint. The same thing with positive emotion, and if weddings are here, which they do take place. I bet after a wedding, for a few weeks, maybe you feel that emotion, the party. Maybe there will be an activity of ghostly parties. So I think that has to do something with it too. If somebody disappears because the mob forcefully comes in here and takes somebody, that leaves an imprint.
Well, I mean, the thing is, people have been reported, they would check, and so if a dad and a daughter checked in, and they haven't been heard of since then. Now, that could be urban legend. I think that's probably what it is.
Probably.
But I also, too, what are your thoughts on, the possibility of it being a portal to another time? Sort of interdimensional, somehow, they can, walk through, a mirror, or, walk into a room and somehow go to another era.
I think it's a fascinating thought. I'm a see it to believe it analytical individual, and
right.
I've never experienced it. But I think it's possible, a Carolyn Perrin, if you know the story, of course, Nella Harrisville in Rhode Island, Nella location, right?
Right.
But time slippages have occurred with individuals. So if somebody never came back, it's possible, of course, the Bermuda Triangle, another popular phenomenon, people going in time slippages. They've found some crashes, but there's some planes and other big objects that have disappeared off the face of the earth.
Right.
So I think it's definitely possible, but I think a lot of it's urban legend.
Yeah.
But there could be some truth to it.
Right. And the story for the Biltmore, it really makes it sound terrifying. It's it was built by a Satanist, and we don't even know if that's true or not. There was supposedly blood sacrifices, in the top level, and then in the bottom area. We know that below that there was a speakeasies, which makes sense.
Yes, for sure.
And I think that could result in maybe violence or that sort of thing, prostitution. But the speakeasy also that was supposedly where there was blood. I guess they would use blood to cleanse themselves with, or something blood purification rituals.
Yeah, some people are into crazy stuff like that. I could see it. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I mean, what kind of religion is that? Diabolism, or is that
diabolism is the form of enacting evil. Satanism and Luciferianism are a form of mostly confused. Not all those people are very bad people and do blood rituals, but there are people that use it in a bad sense, and sometimes with blood purification, it could be something positive, washing away with your own blood, or maybe even the blood of an animal. But sometimes, of course, it could be used in a force of invoking something negative as well. What it was used for, of course, is up in the air, but it has been noted that it's happened here. So it could have been so many things why. It could have been their religion, could have been just them dabbling, and like I said, I do see if somebody was a Satanist and dabbled in the negative, why they would do that and build a structure like this. Like if you were for it, there are many people in history that have sold their soul to get to the top, and they have said it out. There's interviews where they've said this. So like people do it.
Well, I think also too, like they want the what they say in the legend with Johann was that he was using the hotel to showcase his beliefs.
Yeah.
So if you look at the symbols, like there's still symbols that date back from the 20s and 30s when this hotel was built that would indicate ritual and indicates his belief system. I mean, definitely masonry or being a mason.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Masonic, I guess is the right word.
There's a lot of Masonic symbolism in Providence in itself.
Right.
The Biltmore has a lot of it, and the Masons, the Freemasons, are very open-ended. So like there are very Satanistic symbolism in their belief system, in the Masons as well as Christian symbols. But what he was, if he was a Mason, that could be a little bit of reason why some of that symbolism is here. Is it negative or positive? Of course, we truly can't know because we weren't there. But
right.
I don't feel anything evil here. I don't think anything negative here beyond maybe the imprint of negative things happening here or lost souls that were negative trying to have some kind of word, some kind of action. But I don't feel like demons are here. I don't think that anybody has ever invoked a spirit like that here. And if they did, I don't think it's here anymore, unless you feel something. But
there's something in the room with us. I was going to ask you, did you feel anything in the room with us?
I felt something a little bit earlier. I felt like a tingle down, like a spidey sense. I don't know what you would call it.
It's like right behind us. And also, I saw something kind of like I don't believe in orbs, like light anomalies, but I saw what looked like a light anomaly.
Okay, that makes sense too.
I mean, well, we say like usually if it's like they say it's an orb, usually it's like a photo with like this ball of light.
Yeah.
But I have seen real orbs before, and I do think they do exist.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily know if they're spirits. I just think it's energy.
See, I like the word wisp, but
wisp is better.
To each their own.
So. We actually recently shot a documentary. It's this historically haunted Cape Cod. We were at this, this location right in the water.
And hotel, basically.
Yeah, and so kind of like give you some backstory. So we were filming it, and then I had an encounter while so we had this this captain suite. So James was on the couch, and I was on the bed. My bed was like facing the window outside by the water. I saw what looked like a grayish figure walking by. And it was around like 3:15 in the morning, and I know that you woke up eventually, but you're like, "Where's Sam?" And I was outside trying to figure out what was going on.
Yes.
But like, what are your thoughts on like, when I think of like this ghost, now that I look back on it, it looked like a harbinger of some sorts to me. What are your thoughts on like, what do you think it was? And I even remember telling you I thought maybe it was an ET.
Yeah, you thought it was aliens, and I was like, I woke up funny. Did I get probed?
No, don't say that. I'm sorry, but yeah, he so yeah, I was like, was it an alien? And then, but looking back on it, it was humanoid in shape,
for sure,
and it didn't have like an alien head. So do you? And we lost a friend who was filming that night, and I'm kind of like looking back on that. I think that maybe it was a harbinger of that for some sorts.
Definitely, he had an experience that I think enlightened him that day.
Yeah.
But maybe it was something that was kind of a symbolism to the future. And unfortunately, I hate to look at it like that because he was a great man.
Yeah.
But I didn't experience what you've seen, but I definitely could see like not the terror in your eyes, but like
what something just happened.
Like what the heck?
Like it was real.
This is unearthly kind of thing.
Yeah.
But no, it could have been, but also of course where we were too. There's just so much history in itself as well, and especially with what we were attempting communication prior we might have opened a few doors as well.
Oh, that's true. So we like before that. So we did a pretty intense investigation at this location. So maybe it's related to that.
It could have opened a door. You
Yeah.
know, we did.
Yeah.
We did ask open-ended
Spirits.
questions, and we did
Yeah.
ask spirit to come forth, and so maybe it did, but maybe it lingered as
Right.
well.
And so to kind of give you some, so it was this kind of gray ghost.
Yes.
It was walking by the window, and it was kind of like, hey, like it wasn't like, you know,
Like trying to shake the window.
yeah,
or something.
exactly.
Yeah.
It was like,
Yeah.
hey, you can see me, and like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't scary, but when I saw gray, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's an alien, and I can't deal with aliens, and I can't deal with alien probes either.
I'm so glad that didn't happen.
I know, right?
Oh gosh.
When you said that, I'm like, why would you think of that? Was I probed?
Was that
But I mean, so the reason why it would be haunted, like that's a location, like that part of Providence that we were staying at was where the Pilgrims landed in the 1620s.
Yes.
So like that strip of land is where the Mayflower was settled before going to Plymouth.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't know that they went to Provincetown before they headed to Plymouth, and they also came across a lot of Native Americans, and they stole corn from the Native Americans to feed them. Like if they didn't steal the corn, they wouldn't have survived.
Yeah, for sure.
So, like with that, like looking back at that, so possibly by us having the investigation that we had, we may have opened something.
I think from what we experienced, it definitely was mind blowing, and we all had experiences. I definitely think we opened something, but it could have also been, like you said, a harbinger. It could have been something kind of a precognition, like this is what's going to occur as well. Could have been a mixture of things, but we didn't. When people watch that documentary, they're gonna enjoy that, because I'm still mind blown over that. Like the answers we were getting, the communication we were getting.
Well, just to give you a sneak peek. So we were. It was historically haunted Cape Cod. Our purpose really was to focus on the Lady of the Dunes. And then, so we were kind of looking into hopefully giving her a name.
Yes.
And
I think we did.
And I think we did too. And I also think we uncovered something that we weren't expecting, that were ties. And this may or may not be true. And it could be like the ghost leading us on this like wild goose chase. But it was pretty convincing though, right?
Which, you know, the funny thing is, Sam, is it, like you said, it could have had connection to another prior thing that we were involved with, which was in a book called Mass Murders, written by, who's that author that made
I wrote Mass Murders Guilty.
Sam Baltrusis. But very similar to, and connection to, I think, something with that. I don't want to give too much, because like it could, like you said, be leading on, but you know, there was something that happened in Fall River and the Freetown State Forest,
right, that
could have had connection with that case.
Right, so basically we were picking up stuff that happened, we know for a fact happened in Fall River, not Lizzie Borden, something else, but like that area, the Freetown State Forest area. And we were picking up on that in Provincetown. So with that said, I mean, I think that this is all tied together. I'm not sure like how or why. Yeah. I do know for me, as someone who has found out recently that not only am I related to the Putnam family, who were the major accusers during the Salem witch trials, but I'm also related to Lizzie Borden too.
Double whammy.
I know.
Yeah.
And that's coming out, but there's other people, and you're going to be blown away who I'm related to when we did Ancestry.com. And we're not going to reveal it tonight. That's coming soon, but you're going to be blown away. So, James, like when it comes to haunted hotels, why would a hotel be haunted?
I was trying to think of what I could say for Lizzie Borden and the Putnams. 40 whacks and 40 stacks? Nah, that doesn't make any sense.
Like Lizzie Borden took an axe and
40 whacks, yeah. And then I was trying to get something with the hangings, but
you're trying to like bring in the Salem witch trials and Lizzie Borden.
Yeah.
Well, you're creative. I'm sure you'll come up with something.
I'll try. I'll think of it next time.
But like, why would a place like the Biltmore? I mean, we know why the Biltmore. There's so much history. They may have been built by a Satanist. There may have been ritual done here. Why are other hotels? Is it because of the amount of deaths, the amount of people? I tend to think that, like, having worked overnight at many hotels, that a lot of the ghosts are residual hauntings. Yeah. So there's energy, and they don't have to die. in fact, when I was working at the Adams Inn, which is going to be home to Mass ParaCon coming up in September, James is doing a demonology panel there. But yeah, so I basically saw what looked like a doppelganger. So it was a woman running down in the lobby, like she was like running for her dear life, and she was wearing a blue shirt. About 5 minutes later, the same woman was running from the elevator. I'm like, man, were you just in the elevator? And she's like, no, I just woke up. I had a dream that I missed my flight.
Wow.
And she didn't miss her flight, but she was kind of like, I guess, having a terror dream that she missed her flight. And I saw her image. But the thing is, I didn't see her person.
Yeah.
I saw her reflection in the windows.
Do you think it was like astral projection?
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that she was dreaming, and I think that she left her body, and it was the same woman.
It gives me tingles, man.
Yeah, and then I know she didn't die. So like that was the first example of me seeing like a doppelganger. And yeah, I'm sensitive to that stuff, so maybe like the average person wouldn't see it.
Yeah.
But because I'm clairvoyant, I'm able to see even living people astral project. But so anything else, James? Like what's coming up? I know you're part of Duo Demonology. We have the cruise, Wicked Salem cruise coming up. That is November 11th through the 15th.
14th, right?
Well, 14th is that's the last day, and the 15th is when we arrive back at Boston.
We do a tour of Salem.
And then we do a tour of Salem on the 15th.
But also the 10th, we do, of course, it's a separate ticket, I do believe. So, but we're also investigating USS Salem, which is an amazing ship in itself. So technically it's from the 10th to the 15th, and you should do all the fun activities because not only is it USS Salem, a cruise to the Bermuda, and of course a tour of Salem led by one of the greatest tour guides of Salem, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
And his history is awesome. You get to experience Sam Baltrusis, Dan Mason.
And James Annitto.
And Dave Schrader, of course.
And Dave Schrader from the Holzer Files. And it's the Wicked Salem Cruise is the website.com. And, the thing is, I'm excited because this Haunted Hotels with Sam Baltrusis is launching. And my goal is to still be going on by then as well. And then hopefully maybe do a Haunted Hotel
cruise edition.
The cruise edition. Like maybe do do a podcast from the actual ship.
Yeah, to be honest with you, even though it's a cruise liner, it's technically a gigantic floating hotel.
Exactly.
And I do bet, and I hate to say this, I don't say this with any proudness, but I definitely believe probably people have died on that ship.
Probably, yeah. And also too, I think that the ship is fairly new, so it's not an old ship. Yeah. But I also think that getting back to the doppelganger and the energy, there's hundreds of people have slept on that ship. And
many different emotions.
And they're going to leave a psychic imprint on the ship. So I do think that there's potential for a haunting.
And it visits probably haunted locations or visit places of history too.
And also too, the water amplifies the hauntings.
It does.
So when you look at the USS Salem, people are like, why is Salem so haunted? It's because the water. It's because there was so much activity on the ship and so much death on the USS Salem. So definitely highly recommend going to Wicked Salem Cruise. The investigation on the USS Salem is on November 10th. And that will be the day before, and we'll be staying at the hotel, which is the one where I saw the doppelganger, the Best Western Adams Inn. And that's also home for the Mass ParaCon coming up as well.
And the VIP Demonology Panel with Carl Johnson, Keith Johnson, myself, Nathaniel Gillis, and a few other people that will be also announced very soon. There has been a change in the lineup, but you all will love it and won't want to miss it.
Yeah, so the Demonology Panel is a separate ticket for the Mass ParaCon. We've already sold a ton of tickets already.
Yes.
You didn't. I don't know if you knew that or not, but we've sold tickets, and it's because of James's amazing flyer. But because it's Demonology Panel. But I also think that too that there's dinner involved. You get dinner and you get a great conversation with some of the greats in the field.
Yes, for sure.
And be prepared for surprises. Our events always have surprises.
They do.
They always do.
They do have surprises.
You may have a ghost fly behind me or something. Well, James, it was awesome touching base with you, and thank you for being on Haunted Hotels with Sam Baltrusis.
Thank you for having me, and it's always an honor.
Everybody, have a great night.